Hang on, did Christmas come early this year? It sure feels like it, because this week, classic magazine collectors from around the world were given an incredible gift. In case you haven't already heard, our friends over at the Video Game History Foundation announced that they not only acquired every issue of the long-lost magazine Computer Entertainer, but they also scanned them and preserved them and even went to the trouble of putting them in the public domain. This is big news for a whole bunch of reasons, but most importantly because this was an American magazine that kept on reporting and reviewing games straight through the aftermath of the great games crash of 1983. At a time when every other magazine had folded, Computer Entertainer kept games journalism alive, covering consoles like the Nintendo Entertainment System and Sega Master System years before Electronic Gaming Monthly and GamePro hit newsstands. Now, if you've watched me cover early 8-bit games and review crew episodes, then you've already heard me complain that many of the oldest Nintendo Entertainment System games either didn't get reviews or were covered years later by the British press. But that's not the case when it comes to Computer Entertainer. They were actually there when these systems first came out. And if that wasn't enough, they went to the trouble of actually scoring their reviews. As somebody who's based entire series around review scores, let me tell you, that is a big deal. With so many mid-80s reviews to swim through, my first thought was about the Nintendo classics. I mean, seeing as Computer Entertainer reviewed nearly all of the early generation NES titles, can we use these freshly preserved issues to fill in some of the Nintendo Switch Online gaps? Is it possible that we can actually get a little bit closer to having real reviews for every single game on the service? As it stands right now, there are 20 Nintendo Entertainment System games on the Nintendo Classics app that we weren't able to cover due to lack of magazine reviews. To be fair, a lot of the games that we're talking about simply didn't come to America back in the day, so it really makes a lot of sense that there wouldn't be any English language reviews. I'm talking about Japanese exclusives like Joy Mech Fight, the mysterious Murasame Castle, and even Earthbound Beginnings. And then there are games like Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels that actually did come to America back in the day, but it was on a completely different system and in a game compilation. When we filter for the early NES games with no reviews that were actually released in the United States, the total drops down to just 9 games. City Connection, Donkey Kong 3, Donkey Kong Jr. Math, Ice Hockey, Mighty Bomb Jack, Star Soldier, Tecmo Bowl, Urban Champion, and Volleyball. And now, thanks to Computer Entertainer magazine, we can finally remove 7 of these games from the list, leaving just Star Soldier and Donkey Kong Jr. Math as the lone NES games without reviews. So, in this very special episode of Nintendo Classics Review Crew, we're gonna go over the classic Computer Entertainer reviews and see what they thought of everything from City Connection to Urban Champion. Is it even remotely possible that they were big fans of Nintendo's classic one-on-one fighter? Find out now in this exciting new episode of Nintendo Classics Review Crew.
Will it be you? Will your family be the first to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System? The first to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot. He follows the commands you put on the screen to help you tackle even the toughest challenge. Will you be the first to raise the incredibly accurate Zapper and play games like Duck Hunt or action-packed Hogan's Alley and high-flying Kung Fu? The Nintendo Entertainment System, where video technology is more than a game.
Based on the popular arcade game of the same name, City Connection is an early classic for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Published by Jaleco, this is a solid port that is easy to pick up, play, and most importantly, have fun. Pretty much anybody can get into City Connection, which made it a real favorite back in the 1980s. Now, for their part, the two critics at Computer Entertainer both gave the game a 3 out of 4. Concluding that for all the lawlessness of the game's theme, City Connection turns out to be a very cartoonish, cute as a bug kind of game. The action is fast and is accompanied by a familiar musical theme by Rachmaninoff. The cuteness of the game is likely to appeal to younger players, though there is certainly enough challenge for older players as well. City Connection is enjoyable in the short run, but we doubt it has sufficient staying power to keep most gamers playing it over and over again. I think everybody would agree that the original Donkey Kong is a hard act to follow. Yet Nintendo somehow managed to navigate the tightrope wonderfully by giving us the amazing Donkey Kong Jr. Unfortunately, the third time is definitely not the charm, as Donkey Kong 3 is universally seen as the weakest link in this trilogy, effectively killing the Donkey Kong franchise for a full decade. When it comes to Computer Entertainer, they didn't seem to mind that Mario was replaced by Stanley and his pest spray, giving Donkey Kong 3 an average score of 3.25 out of 4. They argued that Donkey Kong 3 is a delightfully silly game that's especially fun to play because it's not as familiar as the first two games in the series. The play action is simple and straightforward, dodging and shooting, but involving nonetheless. The graphic detail is up to Nintendo's usual high standards, with especially amusing facial expressions on the beleaguered ape. If you've enjoyed the earlier Donkey Kong games, you won't be able to resist the whimsical charm of this one. After launching with long-in-the-tooth sports games like baseball and tennis, Nintendo actually took their time when it came to adapting the sport of ice hockey. The result is a better and faster game than what we're used to, really showing off what the developers had come to learn in the past few years. Computer Entertainer agreed, giving this 1988 sports game an average score of 3.25 out of 4. While this is not regulation ice hockey, Nintendo having taken some liberties with the actual rules of the game, it is loads of fun nonetheless. We especially like the ability to change your team's attributes, allowing for more varied play. The feel of the game is quite good, and you'll have fine control over your goalkeeper as you guard the net, able to move in and out to keep the puck out. The view is from a high overhead as the action is fast and furious on the ice below. We found this to be a highly satisfying hockey game, having played a few for the various home computer systems. It's a good addition for the Nintendo sports line. Released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987, this Tecmo game is tough and frustrating and incredibly obtuse. Yet it still maintains a legion of fans who put in the time to eventually see the platformer's greatness. Unfortunately, I've never been that impressed with Mighty Bomb Jack. But clearly, I'm at odds with the critics at Computer Entertainer, who gave the game a strong average of 3.75 out of 4. This game is loaded with nuances that you'll continue to discover as you play the game. Action lovers will enjoy the fast-paced nature of the game while also discovering treasures. You'll find that you're able to send him flying, floating, jumping as you avoid the unpredictable enemies determined to annihilate you. The graphics are colorful with terrific detail and showcase the Nintendo as a terrific alternative to the coin-op arcades. The various characters and treasure items all have distinctive characteristics. Jack looks like a cross between Superman and Mighty Mouse. This is one of those tough, frustrating, just one more time games which will have you back for more and more. Given that it was released at a time when magazines like Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, and Video Games and Computer Entertainment were taking up room on the newsstand, you would think that a game like Tecmo Bowl would have garnered more coverage. But yeah, those early game magazines were a little bit reluctant to review sports games. Thankfully, Computer Entertainer was there to pick up the slack, giving this 8-bit classic an average score of 3.5 out of 4. In a review that's comparing Tecmo Bowl to John Elway's Quarterback, they concluded that the graphics on both games are pretty good. We have to give John Elway a slight nod in this department, as players seem to be just a bit more human looking, partially because of the point of view. There is some flickering, but there are many players moving, so we must be forgiving of that. In the sound department, once again, Tecmo Bowl is the winner, with more varied music, grunts, shouts, and yell of touchdown when that happens. On the other hand, John Elway's Quarterback uses the familiar charge theme throughout the game. It becomes somewhat annoying after a while. Tecmo Bowl even has a halftime show for your amusement. So, if we haven't totally confused you, and ourselves, we definitely have to give the overall nod to Tecmo Bowl. It's really easy to look back at Urban Champion as one of Nintendo's early duds. It's slow, it's sluggish, the characters suck, and the one-on-one fighting isn't very deep. But this is coming after 34 years of hard-hitting fighting games. Could it be that in a pre-Street Fighter world, this was actually hailed as one of the generation's best beat-em-ups? No, that is definitely not what happened. Computer Entertainer gave this a 2.5 out of 4. That may not sound too bad, even above average. But get this, only 15 NES games scored lower than a 2.5. That's out of nearly 250 reviews. Although fighting games are very popular with gamers at the moment, this one has little to recommend it. Urban Champion lacks the depth of play we've come to expect from Nintendo. The fighters have two kinds of punches, which can be aimed high or low, plus corresponding blocks. The moves are made against a background of shops on a city street, with an occasional falling flower pot to dodge. And that's about all there is to it. Although somewhat better in a two-player game than a solo contest against the computer, neither version is likely to keep gamers coming back for repeated sessions. We rate this one a disappointingly dull slugfest. After conquering both the baseball diamond and the soccer pitch, Nintendo returned to the sport genre with their 1987 version of Volleyball. While certainly bare bones like all of the early generation sports games, this one offers more depth to the gameplay than the rest. Believe it or not, the developers actually managed to squeeze the sport into a very playable and surprisingly exciting 8-bit cartridge. Computer Entertainer was yet again impressed, giving this simply titled game a score of 3.25 out of 4. Nintendo's Volleyball is the most feature-filled and realistic of any video volleyball game we've played. Much more than a fancy version of Pong, this volleyball game has all the excitement of an international match. In fact, the variety of moves and strategies possible in this game is so great that it takes quite a lot of play-in time before you can master them all. Volleyball is not as popular a competitive sport in the US as it is in many other countries. Playing Nintendo's video version of the game helps you understand why so many other countries take the game so seriously.
We are Nintendo Ultimate TV Game System. We challenge all players. You cannot beat us. Aim your zapper gun. You cannot beat us. Even with your robot partner. You cannot beat us. Score 1 million. You cannot beat us. Discover new worlds. You cannot beat us. We are Nintendo. We challenge all players. You cannot beat us.
Now, on top of the games that previously didn't have any reviews, there were also a handful of Nintendo classics that only had one take when we last covered them. This meant that the only opinion that was being voiced was often from Nintendo Magazine System, which would offer up a short capsule review that was written several years after it first came out in America. Yeah, this is not what I would call ideal, but you gotta work with what you have at the time, and we just didn't have anything else. Now, with the Computer Entertainer issues adding so many more timely reviews, I wanted to take a moment to quickly update the scores. For example, when we had Computer Entertainer's review of Clue Clue Land, which they gave a 3 out of 4, we see the average jump up 7 points, going from a 62% up to a 69%. Nice. We see an even bigger jump with the original Donkey Kong. Computer Entertainer gave the arcade port a score of 3.25 out of 4. Raising the average from 40% up to 51%. Still way too low if you ask me. One of the biggest winners of this adjustment is Donkey Kong Jr., which scored a 3.5 out of 4, increasing the overall score from 46% all the way up to a 67%. That's a 21-point jump. Ice Climber also gets a big boost, which is appropriate, I suppose. Computer Entertainer gave it a 3.5 out of 4, just enough to see the average go from a 58% all the way up to a 73%. That's pretty much the same bump we saw from Kid Icarus, which used to be at a 68%, but is now at 81%, thanks to the magazine's near-perfect score of 3.75 out of 4. One of the biggest increases we're going to see is from Pro Wrestler, a game that jumped a whopping 22 points after adding Computer Entertainer's 3.5 out of 4 score. That takes it from 45% up to 67%. Rygar, on the other hand, may have only gone up 15 points, but with a new average of 85%, I doubt anybody's going to complain. Let me tell you, that's the kind of boost that a perfect 4 out of 4 will get you. Speaking of perfect scores, the generically named Soccer gets a 28-point boost when we add in Computer Entertainer's 4 out of 4 rating. Get this, it went from 45% all the way up to 73%. The final game we're going to talk about also has the second highest boost. When we last covered Xevious, it was at 46%, but after mixing in the news score, it's up to 70%. Not bad. Of course, this points out the flaw of covering some of the extremely early NES games. I mean, it's easy to cover a game like Mario Paint because in the early 90s there were a ton of magazines and every single one of them wanted to cover it. But when it comes to something like Ice Climber or Urban Champion, there really may only be 1 or 2 reviews. That's frustrating, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. And that's what makes these Computer Entertainer issues so exciting. It helps to fill in some of the gaps in games journalism, giving us an extremely rare glimpse into reporting from a dark time in our history. If you're interested in reading the full archive of Computer Entertainer issues, I want to leave a link to the Video Game History Foundation's website in the description box. Let me tell you, this truly is a treasure trove of content, and you better believe that we're going to be talking more about this long-running magazine in the very near future.
What will the future bring from Nintendo? More hits like The Legend of Zelda. Sports hits like ice hockey. Nintendo has the most video game hits like Hogan's Alley and Donkey Kong Classics, and more like Excite Bike and RC Pro-Am. And you can play them only on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
What will the future bring from Nintendo? More hits like Super Mario Brothers. Sports hits like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Nintendo has the most video game hits, Hogan's Alley, The Legend of Zelda, and more like Metroid, Rad Racer, and you can play them only on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. Now before you ask, I'm going to be applying the Computer Entertainer reviews to not just the games that were mentioned here, but all of the Nintendo classics. If you want to see the full, updated scores, then make sure and check out the full list of Nintendo Switch Online games over at the Defunct Games website. That's defunctgames.com. Now, here's the question I have for you. Will we ever find a Donkey Kong Jr. math review? I mean, one must exist, right? Let me see your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back next week with more reviews and fun. Oh, alright, I can't promise the fun, but there are definitely going to be reviews. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.